Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Happy Thursday to all of you of ACC Championship Week. Virginia, Duke just now 2 days away from going at it in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC to cap your championship weekend ahead of the college football playoffs. Final release on Sunday where we'll learn the final field for this year's college football playoff. A ton on the line for the ACC this weekend with Virginia taking on Duke. And of course, we appreciate you guys for being here with us on All Access AM. We're here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time, 8 to 9 Eastern. Pony Up 214. Good to see you again, my man. Really appreciate you jumping in there in the chat with us and all of you that continue to engage there. It is a big weekend. Like I said, it is also a big week for the ACC. ACC SEC Challenge going at it this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, just wrapped up. The SEC ends up taking it 9-7, but a good showing from the ACC nonetheless. Not an abomination by any means over there on the basketball side of things. We'll have James Fletcher of On3Sports to join us at 7:20 a.m. Central Time to break it all down. And we'll also be joined by Stephen Wagner at 7:40 a.m. Central Time to break down Miami, how they're feeling going into the college football playoff release, as they are obviously off this weekend, and Miami inking another elite recruiting class. We'll break a little bit of that down on the show as well. We appreciate you guys for being here. Please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel, All Access AM. If you're on the All Access AM channel, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton, and we appreciate you guys helping us get closer and closer to that goal of 200 subscribers by the end of the week. It's a huge help to us. Our Thursday show is presented by our friends at Horn Legend, hornlegend.com, HORN legend.com. An incredible selection of great game day classics for you guys. They've completely upped their game on the collegiate side of things. You know, you look at whether you're a BC Golden Eagle or you're a Clemson Tiger. Clemson's got a really good selection here from our friends at Horn Legend. And of course, you can also get your holiday selection all lined up, your gifts taken care of for all of your loved ones. So there's still time to take advantage of free shipping on all of your items when you use code PONY, that's PONY, for free shipping with our friends at Horn Legend. So visit hornlegend.com. It's linked right below in the podcast description, episode description, as well as on our YouTube channel. So please take advantage of that and get your holidays all taken care of, whether it be their polos, jackets, pullovers, or more. Check out hornlegend.com. All right, want to get into our breakdown of the ACC Championship game. I'm much more familiar, I feel like, with Duke, just because I actually got to spend a little bit of time with Manny Diaz at ACC Media Days, kind of in a smaller group setting, and so got a little bit of a feel for how they felt going into this year with Darian Mensah. And during this season, I got familiar with Virginia. You know, Chandler Morris is a guy who basically grew into a young man right in front of my eyes, as his dad was the coach at SMU, Chad Morris, and ends up, you know, going to Oklahoma, then TCU, then UNT, and now Virginia to cap his career. And it's been an incredible run for him to get to this point, and it couldn't happen to a better young man. You know, always loved some interactions with Chandler as he was getting into his, you know, recruitment and watching him go through Elite 11 and all of the camp circuit and things like that. And Darian Mensah was somebody who kind of burst onto the scene as a quarterback at Tulane and really ended up being one of the storylines of this offseason, and kind of that sign that Duke is here to play ball too. You know, Manny Diaz is here to elevate this program and take it to new heights. And they've done some incredible things over the course of Manny Diaz's 2 years there already in Durham. And I think the way this game is going to be won or lost for either team, but in particular Duke, I feel like, is can you win that turnover battle? Can you play turnover free, I would argue, because it really is a thing with Duke where they're the more battle-tested team in a sense, with their schedule having Illinois, Tulane, UConn among its 4 out-of-conference games. But you also have a team that has lost to Virginia at the same time. So how do you weigh that out? And you lost to Virginia at home, and you lost to Georgia Tech at home. So we know that this Duke team is flawed. They weren't competitive in a sense in their out of conference losses, I would argue. I mean, UConn and Tulane, they were a little bit more competitive, but that game in particular in New Orleans did not feel competitive when I was watching it, and Duke was to blame for that. Just the way they really handled the whole trip out there, and I think just didn't have their feet under them just yet with Darian Mensah at quarterback. And you saw that, with a key interception in that game by Darian Mensah, and he's gone on to, play incredible football. I mean, being an all ACC selection, and seeing what he was able to do with guys like Nate Shepard in the backfield, and Barcotti and that whole group, you could tell that going into maybe a next year with Johnny Brewer as the offensive coordinator, they're going to hope to really elevate and kind of get to that consistent level of performance that they need to, again, do things that Duke hasn't done since the 1950s. They're on a historic run so far this season. They're looking to make a little bit more history. It could come at the price of keeping the ACC out of the college football playoff, but that's not Manny Diaz's responsibility to worry about. Duke's 20 wins in the 20 ACC wins in the last 4 years are second most for any 4-year span in program history. So things as a whole are on the rise, getting that handoff from Mike Elko to Manny Diaz. And it is a time where Duke is kind of elevating on the national level, and they've got to figure out how to take it to that next level next year when they get Darian Mensah back. But this game, this opportunity against Virginia, obviously they got the help that they needed from SMU to make it happen, to get a second opportunity at Virginia, which came into their house and pushed them around. And with a healthy Chandler Morris, that was obviously critical. 34-17 was the win for Virginia just a couple weeks ago, and Chandler Morris bounced back from that injury sustained in the Wake Forest loss to go for 316 yards on this Duke defense. But he did throw 2 interceptions as well. For Darian Mensah, he was just kind of a ho-hum, 1 touchdown performance. Wasn't really explosive, just 213 yards on 35 attempts. And Nate Shepard was bottled up. That Duke run game did not get anything going. At the same time, all ACC selection, Jamari Taylor put 133 yards on 18 carries and 2 touchdowns on his resume from that game. So and Harrison Whaley was also able to contribute with another 62 yards. So the number 2 rusher for Virginia ends up having more than Duke's leading rusher and one of the best running backs in the ACC. So a very lopsided performance from these 2 offenses as a whole when you get into that game. And that's ultimately why Virginia was able to overcome those 2 turnovers. They possessed the ball 35-58 to 24-02. And we'll see if that is able to be sustained. Is that able to be doubled down on by this Virginia offense that put up 540 yards, to Duke's 240? Does the bright lights, the pressure, the opportunity to go to the college football playoff end up outshining where Duke is able to kind of close the gap, right? Does that pressure, that Tony Elliott's group, that Chandler Morris, that all of these players for the Hoos are under, does that weigh on them and we end up getting a great ball game? Or do we just get confirmation of what we know, at least earlier this year, that Virginia was able to handle Duke and handle them easily, quite frankly, and prove that they are one of the better teams, the best team in the ACC. That's the thing. Virginia has proved it on the field that at least wins and loss wise, they're the best team in the ACC. Of course, Miami's going to argue all day long that they're the best team in the ACC, as they should. But UVA has lost 2 games, and they've both been by 1 score margins. Miami, same way, in overtime to SMU. And driving to tie that game against Louisville. Carson Beck throws another pick. So Virginia was able to get here, by way of a schedule that was, quite frankly, very friendly. They were able to take care of Coastal, NC State, William and Mary in the non-conference, as well as Washington State in the middle of the season, where they needed a safety to escape at home with a win over the Cougs. But when you look at Duke, they are the battle-tested team. The problem with all of that is they've shown that so far, when things get difficult on their schedule, they haven't really been able to answer the bell. You can look at up and down Duke's schedule, and you could say, well, maybe their best win is an NC State team, 45-33. An NC State team that beat Virginia in their non-conference game, and also took down Georgia Tech, and was able to create some chaos throughout the year in this conference. And at the same time, when you're not competitive in some of those games in the non-conference, and of course in your losses to top 25 teams in the ACC, it begs the question: can they do this? And here's the interesting thing that I think when you look at this game is, obviously Darian Mensah is very talented, and he's able to do a lot of things that most quarterbacks nationally can't. And there's a lot to like about Darian Mensah, but when they need him at his best, can he be that? And I don't know. That's the thing. You could talk about the salary, you could talk about how well he's done throughout the year in terms of passing yards and things like that, but he's got to show it. And so far at Duke, when they've needed him to have a big one, or just even, I look at that UConn game, that is such a frustrating game to watch unfold, because yes, Duke has not shown the ability this season to beat those big time teams on the schedule. They just haven't done it yet. But at the same time, that's a gettable game. UConn finished at 7-3. They lose their coach Jim Moore Jr. to Colorado State. But when you go up there, you can't throw 2 interceptions. And the other quarterback, of course, on the other side, Joe Fagnano, goes without an interception, I think, all season, right? Like, he is just the quintessential. I think he ended up throwing 1 interception. So I apologize. It was actually the next week against Air Force. But you can't have that type of discrepancy in these big games. Otherwise, you're going to get blown out like you did earlier this year against Virginia at home. Now this game, the total in it, 57.5 points. Duke is an underdog, of course. 3.5 points is the line from our friends at BetMGM from what we're seeing right now. So Virginia, can they do it? I think Virginia wins this game. I think they win it probably by double digits again. Maybe a 9-point win, something like that. But I think you see Virginia take care of business in the ACC Championship, and they're able to go to the college football playoff and do all of those things. But that is kind of how I see that ACC Championship game going. And guess what? We're going to get a little bit of an early start on the ACC SEC Challenge recap with James Fletcher in just a second. But before we do that, I want to remind you guys that we are also presented on Thursdays by our friends at Socorro Tequila. Socorro Tequila is an award-winning tequila company that has burst onto the scene, founded in 2020. And whether you like their Blanco, their Añejo, their Reposado, they have an incredible brand for you to try out and enjoy. And guess what? If you go to SocorroTequila.com, you get free shipping on 3 bottles or more. And Socorro is really agave water and yeast. So super clean. That's how they wanted it. That's really how they wanted to build this tequila into an award-winning brand. And Socorro means help. So let's help you out by getting you some Socorro tequila in this holiday season and trying it. And go to their website and you can try any of their cocktails. I really enjoyed, trying a couple of those. I toyed around with their espresso martini a little bit as well. And so it's been fun to have some fun with our friends at Socorro Tequila. They've been doing some great things for us. So make sure you guys check them out. Socorro, SOCORRO Tequila. You can find them at SocorroTequila.com. Without any further ado, we do bring in James Fletcher. our own from On3Sports. Really excited to have James on. James, thanks so much for the time and joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Happy to be part of it.
When you look at this ACC SEC challenge, you had a great breakdown at on3.com about it. It is one that I think the ACC stepped back up to the plate. Obviously, you have some teams that really took it to the SEC in that stance to kind of get the ACC back on the right side of this. But still, SEC comes out on top 9-7. What were some of your overall takeaways from this challenge?
Well, I thought first of all was just the ACC kind of getting back up on the horse, getting back up in the mix, starting 6-3 on day one, of course, on Tuesday, I thought was really big for them. Even though, of course, the SEC did come back, we saw some really strong SEC teams on day two. So for the ACC to be able to get that close, one game away from splitting this, I think is going to be really big for them as they kind of build back the confidence in this conference, which had kind of gone down in recent years.
Let's go to Duke, Florida. This was an intriguing game for me Tuesday night. I watched a lot of it. Duke's ability to kind of battle back, I kind of thought they were dead to rights there for a second. But what have you seen from this John Shire group featuring elite freshman Cam Boozer?
Yeah, Duke, of course, is going to lean on Boozer. He is the engine that makes this team go, whether that's on the offensive end where he not only creates opportunities for himself, but for others from that high post area. He's an efficient scorer when he gets to his spots. Now, what he's continued to work on throughout the early season is getting to his spots. Now, that's something that I think that he's going to continue to grow into. We've seen it over these last couple of games that he's gotten better and better at doing so. So as he continues to grow into that, they've obviously got a lot of size, a lot of length, and some shooting ability that they surrounded him with. John Shire, I've said it multiple times, particularly over the last year, he recruits to a specific archetype of player and an archetype of team better and about as consistently as anyone in the country right now. You know exactly what you're getting. They're going to be tall for the position. They're going to be long. They're going to be athletes who can make an impact on both ends of the floor. And when you surround a star player with those kinds of role players, you're going to get good results year after year each time.
One of the big surprises for me Tuesday night, and I don't know how you felt about it going in, but Jai Lucas going into Oxford getting a win over Chris Beard and the Rebels. That was a tournament team last year. Obviously, they kind of rebuild each year for the most part outside of Malik Dia coming back. But Jai Lucas has made some waves both on the floor now in the early season and, of course, in recruiting as well. What are you seeing from his program, how he's able to have success so quickly, and what is his first head job?
Yeah, I think Lucas is an incredible recruiter. We knew that when he took the job, went from Duke as an assistant where he was kind of one of the point guys on some big-time five-star prospects to the Miami job. We knew he was going to be able to land some big-time talent. His first big get, of course, was Shelton Henderson, a former Duke commit, who ends up following him to that Miami position, had a big night on Tuesday, was a big part of what they were doing. But then to go into the portal, he gets Malik Renault. You get Trey Donaldson from a Michigan team that made a deep NCAA tournament run last year. True Washington, an underrated mid-major guy. This is a coach who just knows how to recruit, whether it's in the recruiting cycle for high school kids or it's in the transfer portal. He's proven that time and time again. He's doing it early in his tenure at Miami. And as they get things worked out, they continue to build as a team. I've seen them in person early in this season, and each time you watch them, they look like they're getting a little bit more cohesive, a little bit better understanding of how to space the floor, how to play together. So I think that they're going to continue to grow and could really make some noise by the end of the season.
Syracuse, too, beating Tennessee. I mean, that was a big win for that Q's program, looking to really show that their reinvestment and kind of, doubling back down, kind of almost similar to Carolina in a sense. You feel like Syracuse needs to get back on the right side of all of this as the ACC unfolds and gets closer and closer to conference play. I'm sure that confidence boosting win against Tennessee is right there for them as a feather in the cap.
Yeah, I think it was huge for them, like you said, for confidence, for sort of the rebuild mentality that they've had to take over these past couple of years. The Jim Boeheim era, of course, was an incredible run for that program, but at the end of it, they ended up in a position where when the new coach comes in, obviously a continuation of that staff, but he had a lot to rebuild. He's done pretty well. If you look at this roster, there's no shortage of talent. It's just been about finding the right pieces, fitting them all together, and they're starting to do that. They've got a lot more consistency this year than in previous seasons. Now at 5-3, I think that maybe most importantly, they're starting to build a bubble resume and get into the bracketology conversation with this quad one win against Tennessee.
James Fletcher is one of our bracketologists, the bracketologist for On3Sports. And what goes into that on your side of things? Because you jumped right on it as soon as this ACC SEC Challenge was completed. You kind of knew what teams were really helped, really hurt by this. Give us a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. I know some people can obviously just sit there and say, all right, well, that was 10-point win, 10-point loss, home, away, whatever. But some of these games, when you put them together with the schedule that these teams play outside of this challenge, very important to get a win.
Yeah, it's interesting sometimes when you're breaking things down, because a lot of people hear about the quadrant system, a lot of people hear about the net rankings, but it's not just those two things. You've got a lot of computer systems that are running. You've got a combination of predictive metrics. You've got some that use historic data. You've got others that are just like the net rankings, using exactly what has happened on the court this season. And so particularly early in the season, we're looking at a big combination of those things. And as we get further down the line, we'll get wins above the bubble, which is another one of these computer analytics that kind of updates and spits out new information. So understanding what is going to go into those updates, and kind of just being able to translate, all right, this team struggled with offensive efficiency tonight. That's going to in turn hurt them at KenPom in that specific side of things. It can become, yes, their wins and losses are very important, but there's a lot of other data that you kind of have to look at and sort through. And over time, you just kind of get a feel for, okay, this team is going to move down more because of the way that it looked, the way that it felt, than necessarily just the box score.
James Fletcher of On3 joining us. We both ended up rocking On3 hats. We did not coordinate this, but a little bit of a team that did not have the coordination it had earlier this year in a win over Kentucky was Louisville, losing by 9 to Arkansas on the road. Obviously, really difficult place to play in Fayetteville. What went wrong for Louisville last night in a game where it's a top 25 loss? It probably doesn't kill you, but man, you'd like to have seen, and that game, wasn't as close as the final score ended up being either.
Right. And, it's difficult to win games when you shoot 41% from the field. It just is. Now, they did hold Arkansas to 42% from the field. So they gave themselves a chance despite a poor offensive showing by at least holding the other team in the same range as you. But you got Mikael Brown, your star freshman. He got up to 22 points, but he was 2 for 13 from the 3-point line, 7 of 19 overall. So he struggled. Arkansas made him work a lot to get that production that he ended the game with. So for Louisville, I think that it's just going to be a continued process over the year. They've gotten some really good results, like you said early. They kind of took it to Kentucky and looked really dominant in that performance. But in this one, going on the road, it's about as tough of an environment as you're going to play in. So it's a good early test. It doesn't necessarily rule out the Cardinals from any kind of conversation that we're going to have among the top seeds, but it definitely does, at least in the short term, give them a little knock. They're probably going to go from one of the top 2 seeds down into that 2-3 conversation as we look over the next few days at bracketology. And,
you look at UNC on the flip side of that, getting, another win over Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky now with that Louisville loss and now to UNC. This is a UNC team that is showing that they might have a little bit of something compared to last year's team, which was very up and down. Obviously, we saw the reinvestment by UNC, and it's paying off with what they've been able to do so far this season, I think, at least. And when you see that type of a bounce back, at Kentucky, that really stood out to me as well.
Yeah, I think with this North Carolina team, one of the most interesting things from the preseason to now where we stand in terms of perception is this idea that they did reinvest heavily. They went out and they got a lot of guys and they targeted specific players. And when we saw teams like Kansas, teams like Duke, who didn't necessarily dip into the portal as much, but surrounded Cam Boozer, we looked at those guys and said, okay, you have a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. Of course, even BYU in the Big 12. We looked at them and said, of course, you're going to surround, insert the star freshman with a lot of pieces that make sense for his game. Well, North Carolina, it seems, did that a little bit with Caleb Wilson. And so some of the misunderstanding, I think, of how good this team was going to be was a misunderstanding of how good Caleb Wilson was going to be early. Now, whether North Carolina was fully all in on they knew this is who he was or got a little bit lucky along the way with a big leap from him, we'll never know the answer to that. They'll always tell you that they knew he was this good, as they should, because he has been really impressive early on. And this team seems to really fit around him from the guard spots to the bigs that they brought in.
And two teams that had lopsided losses on Wednesday night. You have SMU and NC State, two teams that for the most part this year had kind of been playing pretty good basketball. NC State was in the top 25 for a cup of coffee there, and they were able to start off really well under Will Wade. SMU was undefeated prior to last night. How much do double-digit road losses kind of hurt when it ends up looking at the resume? If you have more SEC teams or just a tougher non-conference schedule, I mean, can you kind of cancel some of those poor nights out in a sense?
You can definitely cancel some of them out. And this is a 30-plus game sample size that we're going to talk about. So one game that got away from you, that went down the stretch where your offense wasn't clicking, that's not going to kill you when you get into bracketology conversations. However, it is an important data point when we talk about comparing teams, even if it's not head-to-head. A lot of times you'll get into conference-to-conference conversations. So if either of these teams or both of them end up in a bubble conversation, say there's 2 SEC teams who are also in that conversation, what the committee can then do, in addition to looking at all the metrics, in addition to looking at all of the results in the quadrant system, if those numbers are very similar, they can reference back and say, okay, well, how many times did SMU play an SEC team? What were those results? What did it look like when they faced the same type of competition that this team X played? They can do the same thing with that SEC team, comparing them to the ACC. So you look at these teams that got lopsided results, and I think that matters. But what also matters is that some of these teams on both sides of these conferences are just better than we thought. That Vanderbilt team is now, I believe, favored in some markets to win the SEC title. So if you lose to that type of team, it looks a lot different on SMU's resume as we get to the end of things.
I want to hit on Virginia here too, because they didn't have the season they wanted to last year, and obviously Texas is changing of the guard there with Sean Miller coming in, but to go on the road and beat Texas the way they did, I mean, almost a 20-point margin of victory, 88-69 over Texas. That's a step in the right direction for Virginia. They're playing well this season. Do you have them inching closer to the top 25 in a sense?
I think definitely. This is a team that really embraced the addition of these international prospects, Tice DeRitter, Johan Grunlow, two guys who have played professionally overseas before. And you can like it, love it, hate it, whatever you want to do. If I'm a coach, that is one of the key areas I'm going to go to, is finding these guys who have produced at that level and have eligibility coming over to the United States. Ryan Odom has done that in year 1 for Virginia. He mixed it in with some really good transfer targets that he was able to identify and add to this roster. And I think Virginia is one of the kind of sneakiest teams in college basketball right now. They string together really good results. They don't necessarily have the top end outcomes yet on their record, but they're a team that as they continue to grow, they have a base for their team at the guard, forward, and center positions.
So let's wrap with this. You've got an ACC that so far this year has really stepped back up to the plate. Now, here's the thing. We're, 3 days into December, 4 days into December now. There's some non-conference games to come. There's some other pieces of data points that we all look towards. So far, trending towards a better NCAA tournament result for this league and kind of getting it back to where most people always have it, which is one of, if not the best league in college basketball.
For sure. I mean, this is a conference that has gotten 3 bids the last couple of years. You could mix in a 4th if you had a surprise team. I mean, that is not what we come to expect from the ACC throughout the history of this conference. But it's kind of the reality of where they've been the last couple of years. It's been Duke. It's been, what does North Carolina look like? Clemson has somehow become one of the steadiest forces in this conference. And then can an SMU get up onto the bubble? Louisville has a bounce back season. It took things like that to get multiple representatives into the NCAA tournament. That's just not what we were used to. We knew when the investment came in the offseason that things were going to start to change. Obviously, Louisville continuing to invest. North Carolina puts in money to right the ship with Hubert Davis there. NC State goes out and hires Will Wade. Miami makes an investment with a young head coach. We talked about Syracuse trying to make a push back towards relevance, and a lot of other teams in between. You've got your Virginias, even Virginia Tech going out and getting an international prospect who a lot of people really liked in the NBA draft process last year. So I think that the investment has just been huge from these teams to get back and make this conference what it should be in the college basketball landscape. I see early returns. Obviously, you would have loved to get this ACC SEC challenge win. That would have been a kind of a big coming out party for this conference to say, look, we are back. We are making noise. Respect us when we get to March. But I think that getting the 7-9, getting that close to a conference that is coming off of the most dominant year in college basketball history for a single conference is going to be impressive enough to get them up there in the mix, and it's going to make them very relevant in these bubble conversations with those teams that are on the edge.
Awesome. James Fletcher, thanks so much for the time. On3 bracketologist and just college basketball fiend. Thanks so much for all you do, and we're looking forward to having you back on All Access AM very soon.
All right, appreciate it.
All right, there he goes. James Fletcher joining us on this Thursday morning. Really appreciate his time. Another reason to subscribe to On3Sports or Rivals. It's formed a mega media company over the summer and is now your one-stop shop for college football, basketball, recruiting, and more. Subscribe for just $1 as you get into the holiday season. Great time to be scrolling the message boards of your favorite team. So join us at on3.com and you'll get access to your favorite team's message board too, and access to national insiders like James Fletcher, like Jamie Shaw, who we've had on the show as well on the recruiting side, Joe Tipton as well. Just a great situation for college basketball fans to be in. ACC coaches made some waves over the last couple of days. We saw a couple of coaching kind of as expected moves made, and one of them I wanted to hit on before we have Stephen Wagner of Kane Sport join us in just a few moments. We've got to talk about Brent Key. Brent Key gets an extension from Georgia Tech, a new deal worth $6.5 million annually from what reports are out there from Pete Thamel, Pete Nakos, all of those guys. That's a $2 million raise for the former Yellow Jacket to stay at his alma mater. His new deal runs through 2030. And, for him, you've seen the investment that Georgia Tech is making. Their master plan that athletic director Ryan Alpert is putting into motion now is really impressive. They've got things kind of cooking there. Aaron Philo will eventually take over next year in all likelihood for Haynes King as they look to continue the momentum built around this football program and what they've been able to do on the field and getting into the top 10 and kind of making waves. Just fell short here late in November. Really couldn't continue that sustained momentum that they had early in the season. Defense kind of let them down in a sense, but they've now kind of hit new expectations, new highs under Brent Key, and he gets rewarded. I mean, this is one that, like he said earlier, cut him open and he'd bleed, yellow jacket, blue and gold. It was no surprise to see him stay at his alma mater, but you never know. That's a thing. And we've seen a coaching carousel that has seen a lot of moves made and a lot of guys hired. And it's been the wildest cycle that we've seen in history on many levels. But guys like Brent Key, guys like Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, who's got super deep ties there to that community, guys like Jeff Brom, who we'll get to in a second, choose to stay and remain with their alma maters and places that they're really close with. And I think that's important to kind of note in this new day and age of college football coaching carousel, where the grass isn't always greener, number one. And we see guys get that big payday, that $10 million, that $11 million type of payday. And guess what? They can still fire you and send you walking, and you've got to pick up the pieces. Now, you'll get a nice check. You'll get, $20-30 million, depending on the contract. But it really is a deal where, in this world of NIL, in this world of rev share, do you sacrifice the happiness and what for, maybe chasing that, like a job at, just Auburn, like Brent Key, looking at that job, probably is saying, I know the SEC. I worked for Nick Saban at Alabama. Is that a job that, I'm sure, I got to think Auburn at least gave him a call. You look at Ole Miss, obviously they turned things around quickly and hired Pete Golding, but would they have given them a serious call? It's really, something that you've got to think about in the long term, and it's a hard thing to do. But Brent Key has been able to have an extraordinary amount of success at Georgia Tech, 27-19 overall, and they'll look to make it 28-19 when they get to a bowl game. So he signs a new 5-year deal to remain at the school with a big raise. So congrats to Brent Key and Georgia Tech for all their success. And Louisville head coach Jeff Brom ends the speculation. On3's Pete Nakos reported earlier this year that Louisville was working toward a new deal. So when we talked about that on the show, we said, hey, this is kind of the expectation that they'll get one done eventually. And this is a sign that they're going to keep Jeff Brom. Now, since then, Louisville was able to get a win over Kentucky, but they'd completely fallen out of the college football playoff race and the ACC championship race with 3 straight losses. So they were kind of at a standpoint of, okay, are they going to work on a big new contract extension? Are they just going to rework things? And those are questions that are still up in the air. But Jeff Brom did share with his bosses at Louisville that he is committed to the program and not going anywhere this college coaching cycle. That, of course, according to Pete Thamel of ESPN as well. So that keeps him with the Cardinals. Obviously, they've had a lot of success. They're looking to take it to that next level. Miller Moss out the door. So they'll look to grab a quarterback in the portal, I'm sure, and keep this train rolling. He's 27-12 at Louisville. He's won some really big games. They made the ACC Championship in his first year in 2023. Of course, that 16-6 loss to Florida State. But Louisville is still a team that has one of the best rosters in this league and will year in, year out have one of the best rosters in the league. And that's because of Jeff Brom and that staff and just the way they recruit, their eye for talent. I think particularly at the quarterback position, the wide receiver position. They'll have Isaac Brown back. This is a team that could very well be on its way to another year where they're right in the thick of it in November, at least going into the month. Next year, they'll look to finish a little bit better. So those are the 2 pieces of carousel news. And one other one, and I kind of am going to bury this, but you look at a team like Penn State, they're completely out of sorts. One name being mentioned is Manny Diaz. It's not really gotten much traction. There are other names out there now as the Nittany Lions look to make a hire in that world. But man, what a mess that search is. And I don't see Manny Diaz doing that, but we'll see. A couple questions in the chat as Stephen Wagner is set to join us. from Pony Up 214. Appreciate the super chat again. Thanks so much, my friend. Do you think Jimbo Fisher will come back to coach in the ACC? Maybe at some point. That wouldn't be a bad situation for him. I wonder what job it would be. And I think he can be certainly a little selective with his money that he's got stowed away somewhere in his ranch in Texas. But he does have, I think, one of the better offensive minds in the country, just as far as how they can go week in and week out and be competitive and create different game plans for different opponents. And I think there would have to be a lot of fundamental changes as far as how he runs his program for a school to sign on with him. But I would look at, like, if an NC State, cut ties with a Dave Dorian, would that be a move that they'd pursue, or do they go kind of young, up and comer, kind of an energy hire like Kentucky hiring a Will Stein? That is something I'd wonder. And then any intel on John Gruden coming back? I don't think John Gruden is going to coach in college football. I just don't see it. I think his agents do a really good job of them keeping his name in the mix, and talking with people around the country, it just doesn't seem like his name has gotten much traction behind the scenes to get any of these college jobs as they've come open, and they've been mentioned in certain worlds. And who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Penn State is getting ready to announce him as their next head coach. But right now, I don't see John Gruden coming back into coaching via the college ranks in particular. Although if you look at some programs that maybe need a jolt of an energy or a notoriety and are really kind of struggling as a whole to be maybe relevant, maybe he is somebody to do that. You look at what Deion has done at Colorado as far as that notoriety and kind of that jolt of energy and getting a Heisman Trophy winner. Can John Gruden do all that? I'm not sure. But he would provide notoriety. He would provide certainly endless storylines. I just don't know what job he would take at the same time, too. He's very comfortable in Tampa. He's around football all the time with what he does with Barstool and getting to coach those quarterbacks. I'm sure he's doing just fine in the money side of things, too. So why mess with that? If I was John, I mean, you get to go around the country. You kind of got open doors wherever you want to go for the most part to come see these college programs and be around the coaches. And that's kind of what he lives for. Is to be around the game. And the college football world that we're in right now, I'd be really interested to hear from him what his staff build out would be like. Like, what type of a infrastructure, an organization would he build for a college football program to put that in place and share that with the university and say, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to be successful, because he's now been out of coaching for a minute now, and he's only really been in the NFL. I think his last job was the University of Pacific in the college ranks. I could be off on that, but it's been a while since he's been in the college game and around it. So and it's changed a lot since then. So there would have to be, I don't know if guardrails are the right thing, but you need a serious general manager to kind of run some of that and then work with him on, scouting and all of those things. So something to keep an eye on there if John Gruden ever got into the college game. Let's kind of preview our conversation with Stephen Wagner in Miami. I think this is a really interesting thing that we saw come to the table from Paul Feinbaum, and Paul Feinbaum, you can say what you want about him, but he was definitely standing up for the ACC here and maybe the best interest of the ACC when he said that the ACC should ignore the championship tiebreakers and add Miami just into the game. And they're obviously not going to do that. That's going to be a very difficult thing for them to do and get around all of that. But that would have certainly helped the ACC if Miami could get into this game and get another opportunity at a win. And if that obviously would have hit Miami even harder. But they are sitting back there waiting, and we have Stephen Wagner with us now to talk about what Miami did on the recruiting trail. But also, Stephen, Miami is just kind of sitting back, hoping, fingers crossed, that maybe the committee does something like moving Alabama ahead of Notre Dame after a win over an Auburn team that has 5 wins. Miami's hoping that the committee just wakes up and says, well, Miami should be in.
They absolutely are. And I got to tell you, you see all of these people kind of trying to lay out paths for Miami to be able to get to the CFP. And, they're just waiting for Miami and Notre Dame to be right next to each other so that they can be compared in a head-to-head. If they're not being compared constantly, then what is the point of the College Football Playoff Committee? Like the whole thesis of a College Football Playoff Committee was that humans understand nuance, that computer rankings simply do not. You think of all of the different times that the BCS computer rankings left us kind of feeling like, man, this was a team that just didn't get a chance. You think 2004 Auburn, who went undefeated and yet still is not playing for the national championship because I think who was it? Was that Oklahoma and USC that year that ended up playing for the national championship? The year before that, in 2003, you had, I think, both USC and LSU claiming national championships because USC finished number one in the AP, but LSU actually won the damn thing. They actually won the football game. This whole idea was, well, humans are going to be able to understand that just because the computer says you're here, that doesn't mean that you should necessarily have a chance to play. Or maybe there are other teams that are deserving of the opportunity to play for a national championship. And the committee has completely screwed this up. I mean, the fact that Notre Dame and Miami head-to-head was not honored from the get-go, I think is what's really screwing this whole thing up. A lot of people like to say, well, the first college football playoff rankings don't matter because this is going to change so much. No, they absolutely do matter whenever you have humans, like not computer rankings, but actual humans who are going to use this as the base template they're going to use this as the base template for all of their future rankings moving forward. If Notre Dame, let's say, is hypothetically 8 in the first playoff ranking, I can't remember what they actually were, but let's say hypothetically they're 8. If they continue winning, the committee is not going to start moving a team down regularly for continuing to win, because that means that you would have to admit, hey, I screwed up. I made a mistake the first time that we did these rankings. I mean, not to mention the inconsistencies that we're seeing across this committee's rankings. I mean, the fact that Texas's head-to-head against Vanderbilt is being honored, but Miami's head-to-head against Notre Dame isn't being honored. I mean, it's just completely mind-boggling to me. And now we're in a position where, yeah, Miami does need outside help and pretty much a prayer to be able to get into the ACC title game. I mean, man, if Duke wins the ACC championship, I will not feel great about Miami's chances at all. I think the SEC needs to completely reevaluate their tiebreaker system, because I understand the idea of you want the team with the record of the next highest strength of record, or whatever the hell it is. I forget the actual language, but I understand the process of how Duke got to this point, how Duke is now in the ACC title game. And I understand how SMU is out of the ACC title game. And I get how Miami is out of the ACC title game. But I think, honestly, what we're seeing now is we're seeing a conference that is built more for parity in amongst itself than trying to take the best teams and put them on the biggest stage and give the best teams the best opportunity to consistently win championships. I mean, that is what the Pac-12 was. That's why the Pac-12 no longer exists, is because USC and Oregon, who had carried the conference for so long, and even Washington to an extent, who'd carried the conference for so long, were sick and tired of parity and having to play these really, really hard games in late November that seemingly serve no purpose but to screw the Pac-12 out of a spot in the college football playoff. I think we are seeing exactly the same thing now. I think Jim Phillips is definitely partially to blame in this whole thing. I think the tiebreaker system needs to be reevaluated. I think instead of next highest strength of schedule or strength of record or strength of losses with common opponents or whatever it is, the tiebreaker just needs to be, okay, then the next highest ranked team in the CFP, because otherwise the ACC is crapping on nobody but itself here. It's bad for all of the ACC if Duke wins this game and the conference gets no teams into the playoff. It's good for the ACC if they get one team into the playoff or two teams into the playoff, regardless of who those teams are. So, I mean, we are where we are. I know I kind of went on a long tirade. I was firing off angry tweets. It felt like for an hour on Tuesday night, whenever the playoff committee rankings were actually revealed. But Miami fans have definitely been hot down here for the last week, and rightly so, because for far too long the committee has valued the wrong things. They are constantly moving the goalposts for each individual team, and considering different grading criteria for each individual team. I mean, how the hell is Alabama sitting there at 10 whenever the committee is saying, oh, well, Texas is sitting at 13 because they had a bad loss to Florida, not because they played Ohio State. If Texas had played Rice instead of Ohio State in week 1 and still lost to Florida, you know what Texas would be? Texas would be Alabama. Like Alabama got absolutely shellacked by Florida State in Tallahassee, but it seems that that's just been completely forgotten about and completely overlooked. And people say, oh, well, Alabama's been playing good football. They play in a tough schedule. Really? You were trailing in the fourth quarter against South Carolina. You were in big trouble against Auburn. You only scored 20 points against an LSU team that had just fired their coach and was, just awful offensively. Alabama has had all of the same struggles that Texas has, for that point. And I saw all the stuff that Steve Sarkisian was saying, trying to fire off shots at Miami. To me, he's looking at the wrong thing. The enemy here should not be that we need to be firing shots at Miami because they are a spot above us. The enemy here should be common enemies for both Miami and Texas. They should both be very angry that Notre Dame and Alabama are sitting where they are sitting, when I would argue that both Miami and Texas have far better records and Miami has the head-to-head against Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think for me, watching the playoff committee kind of move things around is where I really struggle with it. They keep them just far enough where you can't have the direct conversation about head-to-head win and head-to-head losses or what have you. And that's what's really frustrating about it, because it seems like the committee has insulated the argument that if you're in the conference championship game, you have to be kind of within that striking distance already to be in the top 12, so to speak, like a BYU. If BYU wins, they're in. Is BYU a better team than Miami? I'm not sure. That's really something that a lot of people would have a problem with, but their one loss is to Texas Tech. Then you get into that kind of Alabama discussion around, why they move up all of a sudden over Notre Dame that has been kind of comfortably ahead of them in a sense for a while, when they kind of sneak past Auburn. Granted, rivalry game, whatever. But are we comparing games? Are we comparing teams? Kind of what is the criteria here is the biggest issue for Miami, and kind of why they've been held back from being up there is because the committee does keep changing it. What is the sense from the team, from Mario Cristobal down there as Miami plays this waiting game? Well, how are they handling it?
It really felt like there was a lot of kind of anger and frustration sort of quickly, but then it kind of felt like they just kind of moved through the 5 stages of grief very quickly, and they've kind of become more accepting that, okay, well, being angry really isn't going to do anything right now. There isn't much we can do but sit back and hope that the committee somehow ends up getting it right, which would mean that the committee is going to have to overcorrect on some of these mistakes that they've made. Mario Cristobal was laying out kind of the argument for why Miami should be a playoff, or for why Miami should be a playoff team, or why Miami should be ranked higher during the recruiting press conference yesterday, when he was saying, look at the number of losses that some of the teams ranked ahead of us, or look at the teams look at the opponents of some of the teams ranked ahead of us and the number of combined losses that they have. Notre Dame and Alabama haven't exactly been playing grade A competition. I mean, I get an argument for BYU way more than I get an argument for Alabama and Notre Dame. I mean, heck, I saw a tweet yesterday. I think it might have been Big Cat I think it might have been Big Cat at Pardon My Take, who said, I'm actually going to go ahead and rank BYU ahead of Texas Tech because BYU actually has a pretty good loss to Texas Tech. Texas Tech had a bad loss to Arizona State, so BYU needs to go ahead and be ranked ahead of them. Either way, I'm digressing a little bit. It seems like there's definitely still a little bit of frustration in Miami, but I can't exactly say that anyone's hot or heated. It really just feels more like everyone's sort of being accepting of what the situation is and understanding that, man, at this point, it really sucks that we're not playing on Saturday because that would mean that we can just control our own destiny, but they're not. And that's just kind of where we are. And so it's going to be a lot of sitting back and hoping and waiting and just really just seeing what might happen.
All right, let's get to recruiting here. Miami signs the number one class in the ACC. Overall takeaways on that class, which includes Jackson Cantwell, one of the best prospects in America, a top five prospect across the board.
Yeah, well, obviously Jackson Cantwell's going ahead and nail all the headlines and grab all the headlines, and rightly so. I mean, he's a really, really, really good player. He's been the On3 number one overall player in the country for quite a while. He was a massive priority for Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal and Dennis Smith, the general manager. They zeroed in on him early. They got the job done. But I mean, this year, my biggest takeaway was this is the least dramatic signing day that I can remember since I've been here. I've been with Kane Sport for 3 years now, and this is the first signing day that I can remember where everything just really went off without a hitch, and there really wasn't this kind of last-minute drama that you typically see. And I think a lot of that is because the drama was knocked out earlier in the year. There was a ton of drama with Jackson Cantwell back in the spring. Well, that was 7 months ago. And that drama was happening in May, and now we are done with it. And there hasn't been anything out of Cantwell since then. I mean, Cantwell said whenever he committed, he wanted to be actually committed. And that's exactly what happened. And I can't remember the last time that I saw, a top five player in the country say, yeah, I'm committed. That's the end of it. And boom, that's actually just it, barring obviously a coaching change or something like that, kind of like with Lamar Brown's situation where, some other schools got involved after Brian Kelly was fired, not going to hold that against you if your coach ends up getting fired. But Miami also this year kind of shifted their recruiting approach a little bit to place a much higher valuation on some of these late season evals, looking at senior tape and really trying to evaluate that and value that as much as you can to kind of add some of those late pieces to the class. And I was talking to Charles Power, the Rivals director of scouting and rankings, about this a while back, and he said, typically speaking, whenever you get guys or whenever you go after risers in the rankings later in the cycle, the hit rate on those guys is historically higher. And I really think that Miami kind of understands that and is trying to really fully embrace that, because typically what Miami's done is they find a guy during the spring, they find most of their guys during the spring whenever they're kind of turning the page to the new recruiting cycle. They pursue those guys, and then during the fall, they just stay on them. There might be a couple of guys who they'll, kind of drop with, but Miami really tries to just stay on those guys and be very consistent. This year, it was very, very different. I think they ended up having 10 fall editions. They had about 20 commits at the start of the season. I think they finished the cycle with 30, and a lot of those guys were guys who, maybe their rankings aren't exceptionally glamorous, although they did end up getting a couple of nice surprises and a couple of nice 4 stars. But one of the positions that they really, really focused on this fall was the defensive line. And shoot, if they're not going to end up signing 4 3-star defensive linemen who they just happen to have really, really good evaluations on, players that the staff really, really believed in. There were a couple of guys that Miami wasn't able to close with. I think they really, really would have liked to have closed with. Blake Stewart was absolutely one. He was a 4-star safety, high 3-star safety, ended up signing with Georgia. I think that'll kind of be the one that got away for a little while. We thought that there was going to be a really good chance that Miami would end up nabbing Amari Latimer kind of at the 11th hour. But he ended up going over to West Virginia. I think if Miami had stayed on Amari Latimer the entire year instead of kind of having this break over the summer and then trying to pick things back up late in the fall, I think Miami would have been able to find a way to get that done. Obviously, yesterday, I'm sure everyone saw that Calvin Russell, the Syracuse receiver commit, said he's not going to be signing on Wednesday. He was going to be signing at some point later in the early signing period, and he was going to be signing by no later than Friday. Miami's not involved there. We do not expect Miami to be involved there. From what I understand, it's strictly a business decision. Miami signed 4 receivers who they feel really, really good about. Shamarian Wingo, the highest ranked receiver in the class, he's going to have the opportunity to be a 5-star player. In the final rankings, there's a really good chance he'll be able to be a 5-star player. Milan Paris, who they effectively flipped from Iowa State, he's a top 150 player whose stock just kept rising, and who Miami really fell in love with this fall. Then they're getting guys like from California, Vance Spafford, who's this really speedy, shifty slot receiver who's really consistent with the type of dudes that Miami's wanted to go after in past years. They're also getting another really big body receiver in Tyrone Evans, who they really like quite a bit. I mean, I'm just not sure if it really makes a ton of sense for Miami to go after Calvin Russell whenever you're also expecting to bring back quite a bit of really good talent that you've recruited that you feel really, really good about. And hopefully you'll have maybe 1 or 2 of these receivers from the 2026 class who are able to make a little bit of an impact next year, who are able to see some snaps here and there.
Yeah, that is the business world we live in now in the recruiting side of things. You know, the high school versus transfer versus, okay, can you play and make an impact while making a lot of money, or are you going to be dead money? It's a conversation around the country for coaching staffs. Miami's obviously hoping everybody turns out to be their next version of Malachi. Tony, Stephen Wagner, thanks so much for the time this morning on All Access AM. We appreciate it, buddy. Have a good weekend over there.
Hey, thanks, Billy. Appreciate you.
All right, there you go. Stephen Wagner on All Access AM with us, wrapping up the show. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in. We covered a ton of ground. And now as we get to next week, we'll talk about the results, of course, of the ACC Championship, 8 p.m. Eastern time on ABC Saturday night. It's Virginia. It's Duke. I've got Virginia winning by double digits in this one to get to the college football playoff and help the ACC out after a chaotic season. So hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All Access AM. We'll catch you guys next week. Hit that subscribe button for me, please. And we will see you Monday, 7 a.m. Central Time on our YouTube channel, All Access AM. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great weekend and enjoy the game. We'll catch you next time.